All right, we're back. Hello, everyone. Sorry we're running a little bit late today. Alicia and I were trying to wrap up a podcast recording. We do our podcast recordings before we go live on Wednesdays, and we wanted to share this episode 147, which will be dropped here in the next couple of weeks, which is all about this intention to reside in the context of provincial nomination. And we know a ton of you are looking to move from their provinces to go to places where you have a greater chance. And one of the expectations when you move to a province and are nominated, that you're going to stay there. And we're going to talk about all of those questions and more in that podcast episode. So stay tuned for that. If you haven't subscribed to the Canadian Immigration Podcast, please do. And it'll also drop here on the live stream wherever you are watching, whether it's YouTube or X or Facebook or wherever. So there we go. But we're back for another Canada Immigration Live Q&A. I was away. What is it? Was it 2 weeks, or I guess just last week? I wasn't feeling too good. I was a little under the weather. So we, yes. And then I think before that, did I? Yeah. No, we did. I was here for the last for 2 weeks ago. So, anyways, we've got lots going on here, and we are a little bit late. So we expect it's going to be a little bit before we fully get everybody tuned in here for our live. We've had a number of different lives and episodes that have been dropping on the YouTube channel, so definitely go there and check it out. We've had one here. This is with on translations, and this was an excellent one that Igor did with a guest that we had there. Alicia and I did our race to file. We did that one, and we covered what's going on within the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program. And then Will Tao and I also did a live, I guess it was about 5 days ago, uncovering the truth all about the IRCC security screening delays. So some of you are maybe caught in that vortex. So definitely go back and check out those more recent episodes that have been dropped, and they will be coming out in podcast form as well in the coming days. We've got a few bundled up here that need to get released, and so we will definitely get those released for you. All right. So how are things up in Calgary today, Alicia?
Oh, I see a comment from Joe, who's also in Calgary, saying, "Good morning from Water Saving Calgary." And oh my goodness, I don't know if people who haven't been looking at the news or don't know what's going on in Calgary. Our main water main broke. It supplies 60% of our water. It broke on June 5th. And so everybody's been told, take less than 3-minute showers, don't flush your toilets, try not to run your laundry and your appliances, and no outdoor watering whatsoever. And so I don't know, for those of us with gardens, I've been collecting all the rain from my rain barrels and putting them into like 4-liter milk jugs, 2 4-liter milk jugs, sticking them in a backpack. And I have a community garden, and I have to hike about like 1.5 kilometers to the community garden with these jugs of water. Anyway, so yeah, hang in there, Calgary, and we're hoping the water gets fixed soon.
Oh boy, what a nightmare. Yes, we've been following it very closely in the rest of the province, and yeah, it's always just so amazing. How does it get to that stage? Who like maintenance of critical infrastructure is kind of an important thing. And so, but these things happen, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see how long you poor folks have to go without full access to the precious life-giving source that we know as water. All right. Okay. So, let's talk just a little bit about one recent change we saw. Well, there's a couple things. One, I think it's PEI has got 3 new, I think, or let's see, or BC. BC has, I think, 3 new programs that I saw coming down the pike. And so we'll have to talk about those a little bit later. I follow, and those of you who don't follow me on X, you can follow, because I try to stay pretty current there. And it seems like that's where the government is posting all of these notifications, both the provinces and even the federal government. Sometimes we can figure out what's going on by going to these social media sources. And I'll show you something that I saw yesterday through the Alberta Immigration and Multiculturalism. And I'm just going to share this, Alicia, here. So on X, this is where I'm now going to get my most up-to-date information on what the province of Alberta is doing. So yes, we've got the updates here, but here on X, if you look, You can see here, keeping Albertans safe is a top priority for our government. To help, we've created a new AAIP law enforcement pathway within the express entry stream to support police recruitment efforts across Alberta. And so what they mean by this, the express entry recruitment stream, is that individuals, and let's go over to the Alberta actual notification here, individuals that have work experience that fits into occupations such as commissioned and non-commissioned police officers and related occupations, police investigators and other investigative occupations, other specialized law enforcement occupations. You could very well receive a notification of interest if you've listed this as your work history in your express entry application. You could receive a notification of interest because of that experience, with an encouragement, hey, come to Alberta, we'll nominate you and become a police officer. And so it'll be very, very interesting to see how this plays out. I haven't seen anything like this all across the country. And Alicia, you and I, we talked about this a little bit offline before we went live. And, Alberta has expressed some frustration with our federal, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, our RCMP. And there's been, I don't know, Alberta just loves to pick fights with the feds. But anyways, so maybe this is a mechanism to start putting into place their own police and to move forward. But hey, whatever. This is, we report it, we don't interpret it. So this is what's happening now, and it's quite interesting. I'm sure lots of you who are in the AOS stream wondering what the heck's going on with these portals and the gong show that was the June 11th opening of the AOS and other streams. It's just, it's so strange and so bizarre. The focus and the target, and what they're spending their resources on. But like I said, we are just the messengers, you guys. We are not we're here to interpret the rationale for any of this stuff. Unless, Alicia, of course, you want to wade in. You're welcome to offer your thoughts on it.
Well, I mean, my thoughts on it is, put on your cowboy hats for July 9th, because that's when the next AOS and this is the interesting thing. So it's not only AOS, right? July 9th, then it's AOS, it's the Alberta Tech Pathway, and it's also, they do more intakes for rural renewal and the tourism and hospitality. And so if you didn't get in under this first crazy round and you are looking for an Alberta PNP under those categories, then you have a whole other world of headaches that's going to start again on July 9th. So that's your next opportunity. The interesting thing with this new police kind of stream is that it's not one of the ones that's going to be subject to this lottery. So if they're saying that they're doing it under express entry, so if it's a regular Alberta express entry stream and they're just kind of picking out people who have this specific work experience, then the good news for those people is that they have a heightened chance. The bad news for everybody else is there's probably fewer spots for you.
Yep, because there's only so many to go around, you guys. And express entry, the province, does an okay job of trying to break down their inventory and how they're allocating the spots. But if you look here, they only have 9,750 for 2024. The express entry stream is only allocated a certain number, right? And it's so interesting because as of June 26th, or let's see, what was the last update? June 25th. Okay, yesterday. They're at 1,139 nominations issued. So there's not a lot of room left for, express entry stream, spots. And now I guess there's maybe going to be a police one in here somewhere. I don't know. It's hard to say what they're going to do. But anything can change. These PNPs are super, super volatile, and they're subject to whatever, whoever's running the government, whoever is lobbying the hardest, wherever they feel the needs of the province ebb and sway, that's where they're going to go. So it'll be very interesting to see how this all plays out, Alicia.
Oh, and Nash is saying, maybe if you go back there to the AIP, it says, it looks like the dates for the AIP streams have changed. AOS now says July 11th, rural tourism on the 9th, tech stopped. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look and let's see what we got here. So July 11th, they say that, July 9th, but then it looks like July 11th. So I'm not sure, maybe because of the volume of people applying, they're trying to spread it out a little bit so that the system doesn't get overrun. That's my belief. So they've just pushed it back a couple days. So July 9th, yes, is focused on the express entry streams and invitations to apply from existing pool. Then rural renewal stream 160, tourism 143, entrepreneur streams, well, it's just doing its thing. So it looks to me like they've just basically separated it out so
Yeah.
that they could just reduce the number of people crashing the system all on the same day. So it pushes to a July 11th. And then I guess we'll see, because they're still figuring out this mess that they've got. And one of the biggest questions I had is that they talk about those who are still in or didn't quite get their application submitted. Well, what does that mean for people who are locked out of their system? Are they going to be able to just go back in now and continue forward where they left off, and they don't have to sit in the queue? And if that's the case, how many people are actually in that queue? Those are questions that I'd love to get answered by the province. But at this stage, there's more questions than answers.
Because it does say the application target was met for the June draw.
Yep. Yeah, it does. And but what does that mean for the purposes of the July draw? That's the question. All right. Well, okay, let's jump in and let's get some questions going here from people that are tuning in. Looks like people are now caught up. We did get a late start today, so I apologize for that. I don't know if there's anything else, Alicia, really that we can talk about.
I wanted to mention PGWPs and no more flag polling. No more PGWPs at the border.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. That is right.
So sometimes IRCC releases these notices on a Friday, and people tend not to notice them. And this was one of those. So last Friday on the 21st, IRCC said, as of right now, we are no longer going to process PGWP, so post-grad work permit applications, at the border, period. And a lot of people used to do this. They finished their studies and they didn't want to wait. And so even though as long as they submit their application, they would have implied or maintained status to work from the date they submit their PGWP online, a lot of people in the past wanted to go down to the border, get their work permit at the border, and it was actually, they've crunched some numbers and they said it was a fifth of people who are trying to flag pull were actually postgrad students who are trying to do this flag pulling. And we've heard, even at the conference, the National CBA conference, when they had CBSA officers there, there's a lot of grumbling from the border. There's a lot of political pressure from the US, especially, pushback saying they really do not want to tie up officer resources by having immigration applications, especially for people who are doing this flag pull process into the US. It really gums up the US. And so they are putting a bunch of pressure on Canada not to have people do any sort of flag polling. But for sure, right now, what's going on is absolutely, as of June 21st, if you are a postgrad, if you are a student who has completed a program from an eligible designated learning institution, and you are trying to apply for your postgrad work permit, you must do so online, and you can no longer go to the border to ask for that PGWP to be issued.
And that is, I think, just the tip, right? We've seen this as we went through the pandemic. IRCC made the determination that, okay, maybe we don't need to see someone in person to do their landing. If they've already come through the border, they've already completed, the biometrics and things like that. Well, maybe we can finalize the landing without needing to have the person appear in person at a port of entry. And you can imagine how much room and how much breathing room, I guess is the best way to describe that, gave the CBSA when individuals in Canada no longer were needing to go down to do a loop around the pole or schedule really that was the issue, going down to finalize their landing at the port of entry, which was always an opportunity for them. But now it's all e-copers, and if you're in Canada, having the ability to do that. So that was the first kind of release valve that went off with the CBSA. But you're 100% right, Alicia. Yes, there's benefits to the CBSA not having to deal with postgrad work permits. And I don't really see it as much of a big deal. I don't have any problem with this at all, Alicia, with them not allowing postgrad work permits to be filed at the port of entry. Yes, processing times can be up to 3 months, but how many other, work permit applications are you aware of where you can file it transitioning from a student to a worker and start work full-time immediately on the date you submit the application? So there's no real, in my mind, substantive problems with it. Obviously, people need to be proactive in submitting their postgrad work permits as soon as possible and not delay. But ultimately, the ability to do that, I think, is what makes this not an unfair decision by the government, especially in light of our international relations. And like you said, if the CBP and on the U.S. side is getting frustrated with this, we don't want to to cause problems from that standpoint. We want to be respectful of the workloads of both ports of entry. All right. Okay. I think we have, I'll just jump quick into one super chat, and I'm just this is a good lead in here. So Norton, I'm just going to, let's see here. I think I've got the right sound effect right there. So Norton says he's got a simp nomination. The 600 points have been added. Postgrad work permits expiring in 5 months. I'm in Canada working. What are the options for my spouse and kids who are outland? This, maybe we can talk about this generally, but Norton, if you are a PGWP, we know that, if you are a nomination, I'm assuming that you maybe got it since, from the time period since the last round of invitations, which on June 19th, there was a PNP. So I'm assuming maybe you got your nomination after this. And you haven't yet filed your application. But realistically, when individuals are in this type of a situation, for your spouse and kids who are outland, obviously they are included within your PR, and the delays should not be astronomical. You should be able to get a nomination fairly quickly. An invitation to apply fairly quickly. And when you do get that, then including your family in your application, you're probably looking at about 5 months of processing. It could be a little bit more. So that's the default, right? Is they're included as within your application. But when it comes to trying to apply for, a work permit for your spouse, it is still possible, depending upon the type of position that that you actually have and where you're working. It is possible to apply for a work permit, but you need to make sure, I think, Alicia, with if it's tier 4 and 5, there's a wage element that's incorporated into that when you're looking to bring a spouse in the low skill tiers. And so if you're working in an occupation where you're not at that above that provincial high-low wage, then your spouse may not be eligible to apply for a spousal open work permit. So I don't know if you have anything else to add for Norton here, Alicia, other than book a consult, Norton, and we can actually talk about this stuff.
Yeah, and I had a couple book a consult, and it was super sad because they got here, but they have been trying to get their kids here on visitor visas, and IRCC is refusing the kids repeatedly, because they're worried about what is the parent's temporary intent. And so I've had a few cases where people said, oh, you know what, we came as visitors, and then we found an employer who gave us an LMIA. We did an application where we ran to the border and we got a work permit at the border, and now we're here under valid work permits, LMIA based, and we're trying to bring kids, and they're refusing the kids. And this is probably because IRCC has a concern about temporary intent. And so for a lot of people, maybe you will find a pathway in to get your work permit or your study permit, but it is still a temporary application. And so if IRCC doesn't believe that you are going to leave at the end of your authorized stay, and you're trying to bring family members under work or visitor visas for children, they might refuse those applications. And this is where it's important to be honest if you do have a dual intent. So if you are trying to apply for a PNP, then make sure that you're not trying to hide that fact when your spouse or your kids are doing their applications for temporary status as a visitor or a worker.
All right. Thank you, Alicia. Okay. One of the things we always look forward to is people who are chiming in and letting us know where they're tuning in from. So we'll do a few shout outs here, and then we'll jump into some more questions. Obviously, there has not been a round of invitations since June the 19th, which was a PNP, and it has been some time since we've seen CEC or even a general draw or a category-based draw for that matter. So we're kind of once again in limbo, just wondering what IRCC is going to do. But the moment, maybe we'll have a draw today, like we have had in the past, while we're doing a live stream. So if you guys see a draw come through while we're talking here, let us know and we'll pull it up and we'll chat about it. Santa, good to see you. Anastasia, good to see you. Good morning. And then Javon says, greetings, Mark from Jamaica. What's happening with immigration? No draws. That's right. Your question, your guess is as good as ours. Geetha, good to see you connecting in. Let's see who else we have here that we can give some shout outs to. Yep, Batman says Alberta is launching the new enforcement PR pathway. So we covered that one. So we're ahead of the game with that comment. Let's see here. We've got some people who are asking some general questions. I'll definitely get back to them. Andy, good to see you over in Ottawa. Thanks for connecting in. Let's see who else we've got here. And if it's your first time, let us know. What's that?
Yeah, I see Israni's a doctor in India who says that he's watching the live Q&A, which is nice.
Excellent. We've got Han, who's Uzbekistan, connecting in. Let's see here. Is there any others that we can zip through? I think that's probably, we'll get to some other ones in a little bit. All right. So, actually here we've got Levine says, watching from Toronto, I watch the broadcast every week religiously. Well, we'll give you some applause for that. And then Sasha's in Calgary and Timiru is in Ethiopia. Thanks for connecting in. So yeah, it's nice to see where everybody's tuning in from. Okay, here's a good question. We'll start we're on the Alberta topic. So let's hit Nash's question here and let's talk about AOS. So Nash says, for AOS, how long should I stay with the same employer after submission? Until nomination? Considering switching to another high-skill occupation employer within Alberta. And so this is while the nomination's being processed, Alicia.
So this is ring a bell and concerns here because for AOS, keep in mind now that there's this new employer declaration form. And so the employer that is going to be the employer who's supporting your PNP application has to continue to support your PNP application. And if you change employers, then you may no longer be eligible for the AOS. So if you switch employers, you'll have to notify AOS and your new employer would have to do that employer declaration, would have to meet all the eligibility requirements as an employer, and the job offer would have to meet the job offer requirements. And there's no guarantee that during the process of the nomination that the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program would accept the change that you want to make if you're going to switch employers. So there's a real risk that you might lose your nomination or no longer be eligible for AOS.
All right. Okay, let's go to Shalia here. Shalia says, hey, Mark and Alicia, how are you guys? I just want to ask, if I have an AOS application, can I create a Federal Express Entry profile as well?
Yep. Yes, you can. So there is nothing preventing you from creating a Federal Express Entry profile. Normally, Mark and I say the more the merrier. If you don't have an application that's actually at the stage where they're forcing you to make a decision on which one to pursue, and you have no idea if AOS is actually going to come through, and you might never get a nomination under AOS. It's such a crazy free-for-all right now. Even if you get an application in, Alberta said there's no guarantee they're even going to process it. So you for sure can have a backup plan of if you're eligible for a Federal Express Entry, so Canadian Experience Class or Federal Skilled Worker, then there's no harm in submitting a profile and hoping that maybe something changes with Federal Express Entry. If you get to a stage where you have a nomination from the province and you have an ITA under Express Entry, then you'd have to make a choice if they're different streams. But up until then, you want to put as many horses in the race as you can.
And that's a good lead in to Marielle here. So Marielle says, hi, Mark and Alicia. I received a notification of interest from Ontario. I would like to know if it's worth accepting a provincial nomination if you're eligible for Express Entry category-based selection. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that goes without saying. Absolutely. You're going to accept that. You're going to pursue every single thing that you can. You're never, ever going to be in a situation where you turn down one bird in your hand for, say, another bird or two that might be in the bush. And what I mean by that is individuals who say, well, if I go through a PNP that's maybe not Express Entry, it can take, 11 or 12 months to process. Well, if I get express entry, it might be processed in 5 months. Well, in the current world we're in right now, you guys, you absolutely need to take advantage of every opportunity that's out there and pursue all of them. Don't ever turn down any opportunity that's in front of you. You can still proceed forward with other options. When it comes to some PNPs, they make you choose. They don't like you to have two streams in the queue at the same time. But when it comes to a provincial nomination versus the general express entry process, there's nothing stopping you from pursuing both. Eventually, you'll have to choose which pathway you're going to go, or whichever one wins will win, and then the other one will be withdrawn. But understand, you never ever want to give up one opportunity just because you see another one that might be coming. And that's advice I give for everyone, regardless of if you have 5,000 CRS points. I absolutely never want to give anything up if I have an opportunity these days. They're precious. All right. Any other thoughts on that one, Alicia?
Yeah, I mean, as long as you can afford it, right? Because there are fees that go along with the PNP applications. But as long as you're meeting the eligibility criteria and as long as you're honest with everybody about, yeah, I've got these applications in process, because you don't want to get into a situation where you're hiding things or they say that you're misrepresenting, just be honest. Yep, I've done all these applications and I'm hoping for one of them to come through.
Norton has a little follow-up question here. He says, my family has a visitor visa in process. I had mentioned that the SIMP nomination was in process, got nominated with family members listed. Should I update the visa office? Well, I don't know what there is to update, Alicia, in terms of the visitor visa. I don't know if the visitor visa was submitted before the SIMP, but this is an example, Norton, where it really makes sense because it's really specific legal advice. I recommend that you book a consult and then we can chat about it. But other than this, yeah, nominated with family members listed. Now that you've got a nomination, I don't know if there's an obligation to notify a pending visitor visa application. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it would depend. So, yeah, if you now have that valid nomination, or I'm not sure where you are in the nomination process, right? Like if you actually have received it, but you've submitted an application. And so generally, I would say if you have not mentioned in your family's visitor visa applications that you did submit a PR application and you didn't talk about dual intent, it might be something that you do want to talk about, because you just want to be careful that IRCC is not saying that you're misrepresenting your intentions or your family's not misrepresenting their intentions. But timing and the order of things really matters here. So it's difficult to, we can only give general tips and information. We can't give legal advice without knowing more.
And I just found Asrani's comment here. I'm becoming addicted to watching your live Q&A sessions. I'm a practicing doctor from India, so sometimes it's difficult to attend live, but thanks that the recording is available. You're very, very welcome. And yeah, hopefully you're not watching our live while a patient is waiting for you to treat them, but it's great to have you watching. Thanks so much. Okay, here's a
And Mark,
generic one. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Alicia.
oh, I was just going to say, Israni also has a question, but we can go to Rowan for now.
Sure. So Rowan here, the warrior, this is a question that it can be applied pretty much across the board. So due to house inflation, what's the best way for engineers to come to Canada? Well, house inflation is irrelevant to the question. When it comes to trying to immigrate, this is what Alicia and I do in our consults. We spend a lot of time trying to assess background, eligibility, qualifications, calculating your points, determining, if there's a certain province or, what temporary or permanent options might be available, Rowan. And so it's difficult for us to say, well, what's the best way for engineers to come to Canada? Well, the reality is if you're just a straight up engineer and you've got all the core human capital, let's say you've got a master's in engineering, even you're 29 years old, you've got 3 years of work experience and you have at least a CLB 9, well, you're sitting at about 469 CRS points, which you don't have a prayer. So the things we talk about, Rowan, are, do you speak French? Do you have a job offer? Is there other pathways that might exist for you? And, depending upon country, right? So sometimes Canada has agreements with certain countries. So we look at all of those things, and that's what we use ultimately to try to develop an individual immigration strategy that makes sense for you, because every one of you is different. Sure, the programs may be, ultimately you're applying for the same, group of programs if you're eligible. But every individual has a different set of facts, a different background, different education, work experience. And so there is no one size fits all for all engineers. All right. Let's jump here back to Nash. Nash is asking more questions about AOS. He says, for AOS postgrad work permit, is 6 months experience sufficient? Well, the answer is yes. Considering applying after 8 months, does having 8 months, Alicia, instead of 6, offer an advantage, or maybe you should wait for 1 year? Is there any advantage to that? I had a consult with this just earlier this week who asked the same question about work experience and a postgrad work permit. And we don't know yet. We'll assume Nash studied in Alberta.
Right, because there's different rules for AOS. So take careful look at what the experience requirements are. So for most programs under AOS, you have to have worked in Alberta for 1 year, or you have to have worked 24 months within the last 3 years in a combination of inside Canada, outside Canada, in Alberta. Or if you did your studies and you have a PGWP, then 6 months in Alberta could be sufficient. And then it becomes this kind of rolling the dice lottery of who's going to get a nomination. If you manage to squeak through this ridiculous application process, who are they going to give the nomination to? And this depends a lot upon a lot of factors, which are not super transparent. And it's kind of a little black box of what Alberta wants and their mix of people right at the day. And one of the factors is, do you have a job offer? How long have you been in the province? And are they supporting your job? So an Alberta-based employer supporting your job is a strong factor. And it might be that the longer you've worked in Alberta and maybe a sector or a knock that you have that is in higher demand might have a better chance. Um, but, just like we said at the beginning, if you're eligible, you can submit that application. And then it really depends on a lot of factors out of your control. So if you're eligible, submit. If you have more experience by the time, a year rolls around and you still have your valid postgrad work permit, that's good because you still have options.
So this is the question Israni had extended to us. He says, my query is for how long an outland PR candidate of express entry should work with the employer who have provided an LMIA job offer. So Israni, we will assume that this is what we'd call a permanent LMIA and that it's just used for the purpose of supporting PR. So this actually is very similar to the podcast that we just recorded on PNPs and intention to reside. So Alicia, do you want to tackle this one?
Yeah, and so this is one that is a big issue for employers. It's a big issue for people who are wanting to immigrate to Canada. And so there are different types of LMIAs. There's an LMIA job offer that's only to support PR, and they're not asking you to come to work on a work permit in the meantime. And there are some that are dual intent LMIAs that allow somebody to come as a worker, and then the company also says that they would support them for permanent residency. Under both of those circumstances, the employer is really putting themselves out there because they have to go through the onerous process of advertising, recruiting, prove they cannot find a Canadian for the job, and only then can they apply to ESDC Service Canada for that LMIA. And then if ESDC approves them, which is taking like basically 80 days right now for an LMIA, it's very long. Only then could they then offer or name you on that LMIA, and then you would be able to use that to get 50 arranged employment points on your express entry profile, which is very beneficial. But it's also super important that you have a valid intent to continue to work for that employer, because that is kind of the key for what qualified you for express entry with those 50 arranged employment points. So if you don't have a valid intent to continue to work for that employer, it puts you in a little bit of a precarious situation where IRCC could say you're misrepresenting or you weren't being genuine in your application, and it's potentially something where they could try to unwind your PR process. So be careful with this. Please reach out, book a consult, and we can learn more about where you're at and what specifically is happening.
All right, let's jump. We've got a couple other questions here. Okay, I'll just address this one quick, Siobhan. He says, Mark, my wife is a Jamaican lawyer. What's the process to be a Canadian one? That's a question for Igor. He just went through this process and it's quite long. And I recommend if it's something that you guys would like to know, you can book a consult and you can talk to Igor about that process because he is very nearing the day when he's going to get called, which is next month. So we're actually meeting with the judge that's doing the bar call here, I think, next week. And yeah, we're really, really excited for Igor. So Siobhan, you can definitely go reach out and take a look at that. Let's see here. A shout out to Johan. He says, Mark and Alicia, hello from Dubai. I just purchased the Express Entry Masterclass. I will be a student this fall and wanted to plan ahead. That's perfect. That makes a lot of sense. And the masterclasses, I've got one coming this Wednesday. So at 4 to 5, or we sometimes will go a little bit longer. I have a masterclass, Express Entry Masterclass, for all those who subscribe. And so it's brilliant that you did it well in advance of when you intend to apply. So then you've got lots of time to go through the videos, educate yourself, and make sure that you're not making any mistakes in the process. So thanks, Johan. I appreciate that. And for those of you who are unaware or just tuning in for the first time, the Canadian Immigration Institute, which is the kind of the delivery arm of our courses, there's a link in the description below. And all you have to do is just go to the website and you can check out our courses. And as you go through there, you'll see that there is the Express Entry Accelerator Masterclass. And there's a bunch of information you can learn just by clicking there. And then you can subscribe. And when you subscribe, you get access to all of the courses right now, all of the on-demand lessons. And then, like I said, every 2 weeks, I go live and I do a masterclass where I answer any specific questions that you feel may not have been answered or that relate specifically to your situation. So great to have you, Johan. Arshnoor also says, I had a consultation with Mark a few weeks back. Just wanted to update you, Mark, that I have started to learn French. Okay, I'll give you one of these. And I've accepted the offer that I got for a tier 2 job. That's good. I think that makes a lot of sense for all the reasons that we discussed. So love it when past individuals can reconnect with us and give us updates. So fantastic.
And
yes.
On that point, oh, perfect. I was just going to say, well, on that point, we can look at Himanshu.
Yeah. Himanshu says, hey, Mark and Alicia, joined today's session just to say thanks to you guys. Finally got my e-coper, so we'll definitely give some applause on the 22nd via AAIP Tech Path. Appreciate your support to clarify things related to the entire process. And then he finishes off with, keep doing good work, and I wish you more success. Thank you so much, Himanshu. And if you haven't left a Google review, Himanshu, I can't remember if you have or not, go ahead and do that. We love it when people leave those reviews. Apparently people look at those and they mean something to them and they mean something to us. So if you go to our firm, I'll just slide over to our website here. You'll see that in the top right, you can book a consultation. And when you book the consultation, there's a bunch of information on pretty much everything. And I'm just trying to remember, is it on the main page that we have it?
Landing page, yeah.
Yeah, right here, we've got a review. So this is something that we're very, very proud of, this 4.9 review, and all the people that have taken the time to leave Google reviews. We really appreciate it because it's kind of an independent way of saying, hey, the consults are worthwhile, and working with Holthe Immigration Law helped me in my journey. And that's really what we're trying to do. Okay, here's a great one, Alicia. I'll let you answer this one. Are you expecting July 11th to go smoothly?
No, I'm really not. That's my answer to that.
Yeah, I think we could probably leave it at that too. Joe says, what's your take on the AAIP closing their July draws except for AOS? So I think this is maybe where the confusion lies here. He says, I was waiting for July 9th to apply for Tech Pathway, but saddened to see it was not available. So if we go back into the right here, let's just take a look at the actual report. So we can see here, accelerated Tech Pathway, invitations to apply from existing pool. So essentially what he's referring to is the fact that the accelerated tech through July, they're going to take 50, but they already have enough in the existing pool that they're not going to open it up to new people. So you have to wait until August. So, and then if we look at this, you can see now, as of just yesterday, renewal stream is indicating that the application target is met. But it wasn't. The row renewal stream didn't have this here. So you guys really need to pay attention. I wish they did a better job of notifying, other than just throwing up a, something here. I wish they would, post it. And like I said, if you haven't subscribed to the Alberta Immigration and Multiculturalism, X channel, I would absolutely do that, because it seems like this is where the most up-to-date information is being posted. So you can see here, June 17th, AOS update, application target is now being met. I guess it's just, I wish they would post here, the fact that that there's been, the target for row renewal stream is met. So you've got to access all of these different sources in the hopes of figuring out which one is, is really the most current up-to-date information. So that's a good point. So what are your thoughts on this, Alicia? Like, I think obviously August, they say that they're going to continue forward with more of the, and I have a client who's in the process, going down that path of getting things prepared, or hopefully prepared. In his case, the company had closed the office in Alberta and had gone virtual. And I said, you can't do that. So he's in discussions with them to see if they will reopen the office and their physical office. But yeah, what are your thoughts on all of the challenges people are having with the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program?
I just think there are going to be, if you manage to navigate this ridiculous queue it system, you manage to get in an application and pay for that application. My suspicion is when they open up those application spots, there are going to be a whole bunch of applications that are not meeting minimum eligibility criteria, that the employers didn't properly do the declarations, or they don't understand what they were actually signing off onto. Or like you said, Mark, there's going to be employers who are not eligible, or job offers that are not eligible. People were racing to try to get these applications in. The portal was crashing, it was opening, it was closing. There are going to be mistakes all over the place. And so a lot of those applications that were received are not going to be eligible. And it's hard because they increase the processing fees, right? Like it's
really
$840 that
expensive.
you've got to pay to put that application in. And there's no guarantees that it's going to be even processed. So I just wish Alberta would have clear criteria like some of the other provinces, like Ontario, like BC, where they say, look, here are the points that you're going to get on a provincial points basis, and we're going to allocate things based on those points. But that is not what they've done.
Yes, exactly. All right. I want to just pull up this super chat from Raphael. He says, my 3-year closed work permit with LMIA is coming to an end in 2026. To extend it, should my company issue a new LMIA? So, Raphael, unless you have the ability to submit an economic PR program or otherwise have access to the bridging open work permit process, generally speaking, for people, if you don't have pathways to PR and you're on an LMIA, that's usually the route you go. Now, sometimes the companies have access to other work permits. Maybe they're an international company. And I'd strongly encourage you, if you want to understand all of the ins and outs of the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, the International Mobility Programs, that you go back and start on episode 100 of our Canadian Immigration Podcast. And you will see and you'll learn a ton about how the Temporary Foreign Worker Program and the International Mobility Program works. But generally speaking, Raphael, yes. And this is something we're going to see more and more of. As pathways to PR end, and as as they continue to be narrowed, and the options for PR are just non-existent, individuals are going to be increasingly turning to LMIAs. And it's not even individuals; it's the employers who may want to keep you, and they have to be able to secure those LMIAs in order to obtain work permit. New work permits, whether you're on a post-grad work permit or an open work permit, or even if you're on an LMIA like Raphael right now, those LMIA-based work permits, when they come to an end, a new LMIA needs to be applied for in order to extend that work permit. So make sure your company does it well in advance, my friend, because these things can take time. And even when you think you've got it figured out, things can pop up and cause delays. And the last thing you want is to be scrambling where you don't yet have the LMIA and your work permit is expiring. All right. Okay. Let's see what we've got here next. I had a couple others. Okay, let's talk about this question of Nabil here with the West Report. And this is a good question, actually. He says the West report shows 3-year bachelor's degree for my foreign bachelor's degree. Okay, so maybe it was a 4-year program, maybe it was a 3, I don't know. But it equates to a 3-year bachelor's degree, a 3-year bachelor. And then he did a 2-year postgrad certificate in Canada. Will this count as 2 or more certificate diplomas degrees in express entry?
And maybe, Mark, what you can
Yep,
do is pull up that express entry criteria,
you bet.
because this is the helpful way to try to look at how they rank your education history. And so if you look at this and you go down to the principal applicant and you go down to education. So as long as you have 2 or more certificates, one of which is a program for 3 or more years, depending on whether you're applying as a single person or with a spouse, then hopefully if you got that West for a 3-year bachelor's plus you have a 2-year for sure Canadian DLI education, then you should be getting the points for 2 or more certificates, one of which is a 3-year program.
Easy peasy, Nabil. That one was. Okay. Sash says, hey, Mark and Alicia, I have a question about job offers. So I'm earning less on average than a person would earn in my position. Am I not allowed to apply for a nomination through AOS?
And so this is where the wage is important. And so take a look. If you go to the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, you go to AOS and they talk about the minimum wage for an eligible job offer. And so if you link to that, it's going to take you to the ALIS site. And they say on there that you have to have, here, we're almost there.
I got to skip through it here, or they've changed it on us. Let's see.
But when you look at the wage, it'll talk about whether you are meeting the lowest starting wage according to ALIS. So this is where you've got to double check, and hopefully Mark can find it here. But
I'm trying to find it. Did they remove it? I don't think so.
it might be under the job offers. Like it might not be under.
Gotcha.
It might be under eligible job offers. Yeah, so if you click there and then you go down to employer requirements, job offer requirements. So if you go down to the job offer requirements, yeah, right there. So meet or exceed the lowest starting wage for your occupation across all industries in Alberta. And so this is where it's going to take you to the ALIS website, and we can just pick one. You can go to something common, and yeah, and the problem with this is that ALIS uses the old NOT code, so they use the 4-digit NOT code. So you're going to have to go to the table of concordance and double check that your 4-digit NOT code is translating to the 5-digit NOT code. But if you look down on here, it's going to talk about, so the website said the lowest starting wage. So you can look at this, and if you look at the starting wage in the table, or if you look at, so the graph, I guess, and then there's a table underneath that says wages starting low 5th percentile. So if you're an engineer, technically you must be meeting $27 as the lowest starting wage in order for that to be an eligible job offer.
And so basically what they don't want is employers who are trying to undercut, the wage structure, or at least put downward pressure on wages to the extent that they're paying you under market. And they recognize, at least unlike, the temporary foreign worker program that mandates that through the wage and the job bank wage listing that you're being, the prevailing wage rate, the average wage is the wage that you have to be paying. This does have a lower wage threshold than you would need for really for an LMIA application. And that's something, I guess, that one thing that people should understand. So the question here is, am I not allowed to apply for a nomination? I have a question about jobs. So I'm earning less than an average that the person would earn in my position. So I guess the question is, what we don't know is if the average that you're referring to here is the average, is this average here, or whether it's like the average for the lowest person. So,
or is it a job bank average, right? Because most people are looking
job
at
bank,
job bank,
yeah,
which is a national versus this is an Alberta specific. And so be careful with all this. It is very confusing. Make sure to go to the program criteria, look at eligible job offers, and look at the wording that they use for what is required for AOS.
All right. Well, I think, Alicia, unless you have any other questions, I think we might wrap it up today. We'll give a shout out to a few people. We've got Jelani, thanks for tuning in Fernie, BC. And yes, I'm just thinking here if there is any others that we want to touch on. We'll hit one last super here that snuck in. Adnan says, just like last week, applied for the rural renewal. My LMIA work permit expires April next year. What should I do now? Prepare, Adnan, for your employer to apply for a new LMIA. That's 100% what you're going to do, because the processing times, even for the rural renewal stream, can be 7-8 months. And you do not want to be in a situation where your work permit's expiring and you don't have a means of extending it. So in your situation, 100%, there wouldn't be any world, at least for me, where I wouldn't have the employer consider an LMIA, especially if you're working on an LMIA right now. Now, things could go fast, and maybe the rural renewal stream, maybe you're nominated quickly and you have the ability to file your PR and go through a bridging process, or you get an R204C letter. Maybe one of those options could materialize, but I would never, ever count on it. So I would always be prepared, because the province of Alberta, the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program does not recognize maintained status. And so if your work permit is expiring and they haven't yet issued the nomination, they may choose not to do it unless you have a valid work permit. All right. I think that pretty much covers it. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. It was a great live. We're here every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Alicia and myself. Sometimes Igor will fill in for one or each other of us here. But we appreciate your support. We appreciate all that you guys do. Remember that this is sponsored by the Express Entry Accelerator, the 2024. And I talked about this a little bit briefly. If you are going through the Express Entry process, you absolutely want to connect in and join our group here. We've got a private group that's associated with everyone who subscribes. We have over 10 hours of video content that walks you through every part of the Express Entry process. There's templates, there's tools to help you. There's all kinds of resources, sample documents. And of course, every other week, we meet bi-weekly from 4 to 6, where you get your individual questions answered. And it's in a much more in-depth process than I can ever do here in our live Q&A. All right. Well, wish everybody all the best. Good luck. And we will see you guys again next week. Take care.